of Jesus.
Chaplains on Air.
The chaplains are now in. Here on Chaplains on Air.
Chaplains on Air.
Thursdays at 6 p.m. only on radyo-katipunan 87.9 FM.
Jescom Music Ministry. Music that uplifts the soul. Follow jescom.ph on Spotify and Jescom Music on YouTube. We are also on iTunes and Deezer.
Kaibigan, alam mo na ba kung ano ang mga karaniwang sintomas ng COVID-19? Ito ay ang mga sumusunod: lagnat, pagkapagod, at dry cough. Habang sa ilan naman ay sipon at baradong ilong, sore throat o diarrhea. May ilan naman na wala pang sintomas, pero pwede pa rin nilang maipasa ang virus sa iba. Kung ikaw ay nasa mga lugar kung saan kumakalat ang COVID-19 o kaya may close contact sa mga taong kumpirmadong may COVID-19 o sa mga nag-aalaga sa kanila, ipagbigay alam ito sa health worker sa inyong barangay. COVID-19, kayang-kaya nating tapusin.
W-Eagle kami, di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atenista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero sugo, todo sa kayod, tunong at tulong. Ipagka Blue Eagle, galing hiting at tigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan.
Let us understand mental health and explore how we can take care of our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Welcome to your weekly slice of mental health tips and tidbits with Pat and B, here on MindEd.
Sa'yo sumisilong kapag ang puso ko'y pagod.
Hello and welcome to MindEd, your weekly slice of mental health tips and tidbits. My name is Pat, and unfortunately, B can't make it tonight, but we are extending all of our well wishes and prayers. She's fine, guys. It's just that she's feeling a little bit under the weather, but that's okay. I'm here. So, ang co-hosts ko tonight, guys, is kayo. So please engage with me. The comment section is wide open, and you guys can just kind of chime in whenever you feel like. It's kind of weird to do the kamustahan by myself, so I will just ask myself, Patrick, how are you? Ooh, okay. Patrick has had a very, very hectic week, so to speak. So it's still October, and October, as you guys know, if you've been joining us over the past couple of weeks throughout October is Mental Health Awareness Month, where we celebrated Mental Health Awareness Day last October 10. And so we're continuing on this month with episodes that really feature some things that aren't really commonly tackled when we talk about mental health or mental health awareness. So last week we had people over from the Commission on Gender Equality from the Sanggunian of Ateneo. and I hope that you guys got to participate in some of their events over the past week with One Big Pride. And so this week naman, as you guys might not know, it's actually ADHD Awareness Week. So what we have something very, very special lined up for you guys tonight. As you might have gathered from, if ever, the caption of this episode or from my page over on Psychopath, we're learning more about ADHD. In my experience, even as a psychotherapist and having gone through my training as a therapist or my undergrad in psychology, ADHD is not something that I have a particularly deep understanding of. And so I'm excited to have tonight a few people who are part of the ADHD Society of the Philippines. More on that later. But yeah, I mean, kayo, in the comments, hi Les, hi Miss Josephine. If there's anything that you have, any questions that you might have about ADHD or anything in particular that you want to learn about this condition or this diagnosis, just feel free to put it in the comments section already so that we can kind of circle back to it when we talk or speak with our guests. Our first guest for tonight is actually one of the founding members of the ADHD Society of the Philippines. Her name is Dr. Marjorie Lim. Dr. Lim, are you here with us?
Yes, hi Pat, I'm here and good evening.
Hi, Dr. Lim. Good evening. Sige, first off, we have other guests tonight too. We'll get to them in a bit, but I just wanted to focus a little bit on you, Dr. Lim. How are you?
Well, under the circumstances, I'm really happy to be here because, ADHD and mental health issues are intimately related to each other. Kasi if we don't detect and help them manage their ADHD, mental health issues is a very common side effect. And so I'm really happy to be here. And I have a personal agenda because, you see, it doesn't run in my family, it gallops in my family.
Oh,
so,
my goodness. Okay.
Yes. So for me to really talk about it and really be able to advocate for it is a special advocacy really for me. So thank you for having us here.
Sure, Dr. Lim. Thank you for being here also. We'll pick your brain around your expertise as a psychiatrist and pediatrician more in a bit. But we also have here parents, Marge and Jay. Hello, good evening.
Hi. Hello.
Hello, kamusta kayo today?
We're fine. We just went to my in-laws and our sons played with their cousins for a couple of hours. It's been good because they haven't been seeing any kids lately. Their age, they're just on online all the time.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
It's a challenge for children right now, especially for people or persons with ADHD. So. It's good that we bring them out every now and then, get some fresh air, and go to the garden most of the time, so that they can explore and have fun with their cousins.
The kids have been craving for face-to-face interaction, and they got the chance this afternoon, so it's a good day.
That's good. So Marge and Jay Ruiz are here to talk about their experience of being parents to. Am I right? Is it one of your children or both of your children are diagnosed with ADHD?
We have twins, but one has been diagnosed with ADHD.
All right. So guys, thank you for being here. Comment section, please welcome our guests. But sige, maybe let's just start it off. Dr. Lim, could you tell us a little bit more? So ADHD, as I understand it, is a according to the DSM, is a developmental disorder. But beyond that, could you tell us a little bit more?
Okay. Well, first of all, ADHD is a brain-based condition. It's not something that you see at birth. It usually happens or is diagnosed clinically when they start to have the symptoms of ADHD, which is a triumvirate of problems. Hyperactivity, which is they have boundless energy and they seem to not be able to keep still. And that's because of certain brain functions that are there but are not consistently functioning as expected. And because it's developmental, in other words, children are expected to be hyperactive, are expected to be active in general. It's not detected quite easily and it's
Yeah.
quite difficult to quantify. Then there's hyper impulsivity, which is the other symptom, which is also because of the maturity of the brain to be able to inhibit oneself from certain actions. And so these children or these individuals will tend to blurt out, butt in, be impatient, get a little bit upset for even the slightest things, but to them it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then the third symptom would be inattention, which is not necessarily a lack of attention as much as the difficulty with budgeting attention. Sometimes they cannot focus when it's something that does not grasp their interest. But when it becomes something that is really something they really like, they can hyper focus actually. And it's the shifting of focus which gets them into trouble sometimes. So any three, you can have a combination, which is the most common, which is hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive. And then you can have the hyperactive impulsive type, which is commonly the ones that get into trouble a little bit. And then there's the inattentive type, which are the ones that kind of fall behind, seemingly mabait, and then they sort of lose themselves, they daydream. They're the ones that don't really get it sometimes because they're not focused on the right thing.
Yeah. So as I understand, there are three major criteria or three major areas or symptoms of ADHD. It's inattention, it's hyperactivity, and it's impulsivity. Is it possible that sometimes it's only one of these dimensions that is present, or it's all three that is usually kind of that goes together?
Like I said, it's a possibility that hyperactivity and impulsivity are together.
Yeah.
It could be that it's combined, or it could be just one, which is the inattentive. But
Yeah.
it usually has one component and another, not as prominent as the others, so that each individual that's diagnosed is unique. And because they have coexisting conditions like clumsiness,
Yeah.
like learning difficulties, like language delays, each child should be treated differently, but
That's right.
in a very, humane fashion.
Yeah. Marge and Jay, it makes me curious then. So you mentioned you have twins. If I'm recalling correctly, they are 10 years old now.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
10.
Yeah. When did you suspect that, what was it, at what age did you recognize that, something might not be going right, or that something might have been off? And what prompted you guys to, seek help from, a psychiatrist or a pediatric psychiatrist to kind of figure out what was going on?
Well, the boys were born premature. They were delivered 27 weeks. So as when they were still infants, we were already looking for signs, and we were very conscious about the milestones. And what we noticed was the two were not behaving the same manner. One was very what how do you say? He had so much stamina as an infant.
Sure.
And I couldn't
Nice.
believe how much energy he had. He would start crying in the middle of the night, and it would go on for at least 3 hours. And as compared to the other one, he'd be more calm, and he would sleep and eat with ease. So as an infant pa lang, we already noticed that certain behaviors are not typical.
But we got him diagnosed when when they turned grade 1, I think, right? That's when they turned grade 1, we enrolled them at the Ateneo, and both of them passed school, but we suddenly felt like, I think Gabby was
He was always forgetting to turn in his homework.
It's not his.
It would
There you
stay in the
go.
bag.
It would stay in the bag all the time.
And then when we would fetch him, he would leave behind a lot of his stuff.
So we figured, there might be something wrong here. So we brought him to a pediatric developmental doctor, and she recognized that it might be ADHD. But of course, at first, it's hard to accept. That for us parents, it's hard to accept that there's something mental health problem with your son. So it took us a while, although we've been suspecting ever since, as Marge said, ever since he was a baby. Sometimes he hyper focuses, and sometimes he's full of energy. Sometimes naman he's inattentive. So first during his kindergarten and nursery, because they both went to child study center, they were doing fine. So they were doing all right. But when Gabby went to grade school already and enrolled him at the Ateneo, I think he had a hard time. So after a month or two, we transferred him to a different school, which is more, not naman smaller class, because for people with ADHD, they'd rather have a smaller class than a large class. So
yes, everything would distract him kasi even like
less stimuli. Yeah.
yes, if his classmate has a certain scent for his hand sanitizer, it would distract him.
Yeah.
A room full of 50 boys would be different
from a room full of for just 12 people in a class. So so we had to adjust and accept the way things are, and then realize that he needed therapy. And once you get into a lot, therapies, interventions, it works. The therapy works. And one thing, because we tried so many things actually.
Yeah.
We tried, nutrition, rest, and supplements, and then of course therapies like music therapy, occupational therapy,
reading intervention.
Yeah.
What we did was my wife was very patient with the kids, because ever since they were little boys, she would read to them all every night. I mean, both of us would read to them every night, and somehow it worked. That it's at least they were. My son is able to read and write, and he likes reading a lot. I mean, we talked to developmental pediatricians, and they said that one thing that is nice about your son is that he loves to read, and Marge taught him how to play the piano. Just but you really need a lot of patience.
Yeah,
it takes so much patience to teach people like with ADHD. You have to have patience and understanding.
Yeah.
Can I interject? Can I
Please,
interject a little bit? Yeah. First of all, correction, I am a developmental pediatrician. And secondly, one of the biggest misconceptions about children and individuals with ADHD is that they are not cognitively capable. They're very intelligent and very talented. I have to stress that very much. And that it's borne out. Even if they have all these comorbidities, a lot of them are very intelligent. And that's why we need to tap on that intelligence. We need to find that out soon as possible so that we can really preserve the self-esteem.
Yeah.
So I just had to say that because it's really important to
that's very
right.
Thank you. Yeah. Marge and Jay, I really appreciate the difficulty that you guys kind of went through. But if there's anything really that screams out at me as you were talking about your experience, is that you guys are very supportive and very loving parents. And I just want to, let that be known that, if you guys sometimes don't feel that, for sure. Ako pa lang, I mean, like in the last 10 minutes that you guys been talking, that's what screams out at me really. Dr. Lim, I have a question. So I know the answer to this, but just for the appreciation of everybody. So Marge and Jay were telling about their experience of seeking out a consult with a developmental pediatrician. And so it's the assessment for ADHD something in along the lines of just a test, or is it something that it's a battery of things that you really need to observe for over a period of time?
It's really a process, Pat, because it's, although for us, you can already tell based on experience when
Yeah.
you have all these symptoms, no? And what really strikes out is that there seems to be a difficulty somewhere. There seems to be a quote unquote impairment. I don't like to use the word, but that's really how it is described in the DSM.
Yeah.
And it's either an occupational issue, which is as a young child, a student, or it's a social issue. And so it's a clinical diagnosis, and very few tests really can help you diagnose that from a laboratory standpoint. No, so there
Yeah.
are a series of tests, but it's usually to determine the coexisting conditions like learning disabilities, reading disabilities, coordination issues, and all of that, rather than, but there is a battery of tests. It is a process, but the first step is getting to see from a checklist, from a teacher's inputs, from interviews of parents and significant others about who and what is causing the difficulty in the family or in the
Right.
child. Right.
Right. Thank you. You were mentioning also that ADHD is not just like like a behavioral diagnosis, but there's a biological aspect to it.
Yes, yes.
And as research has shown, it's often that it's a hypofrontality is the term.
Yes, yes.
Like a lack of activity in the
frontal
the
lobe.
prefrontal lobe. Yeah. And so it's really something, I mean, but despite that, like, and I can attest to this, like I have family and I have worked with people who have been diagnosed with ADHD, and they're absolutely brilliant people. It's just that, the difficulty, or why there is like a feeling of being academically left behind, is because it's hard for them to really just stick to the tasks that are given to them. So I guess, question to you, to both Dr. Lim and to Marge and Jade. So what's it like to kind of have to adapt to alternative learning methods? And Dr. Lim, what are the alternative ways that people with ADHD, in terms of modalities of learning, what can they do?
Before I answer that, I'd like to tell you first of all that I have some students who are in Ateneo and can stay in Ateneo. I've even had some that have graduated from the Ateneo. Okay, so it does not preclude that, but really, it's very challenging. It is a difficult thing to have to deal with so many, because you see, the filtering mechanism, the hypofrontality, as you call it, it's very hard for them to just filter out. No, so it's very important that they have structure, and that structure has to come into even the small class size that most of these kids need. Why small class size? Because they also need immediate feedback. They need to know that they're doing okay or not okay. And you have to be kind of creative in the way you feedback to them, because they don't necessarily understand it if you just call them out that easy. You have to also kind of interrupt them in a way where they don't get upset because you're shifting their focus, and it's so hard for them to focus. So alternative ways, basically, to me, small class size, structured environment, predictability, discipline, routines are very important. And I must stress, even so now that everybody's stuck to their screens, is physical activity and experiential learning. Because a lot of them are talented in other areas, and it's not just the linguistic learning that you have to tap into. They have to tap into experiential, kinesthetic learning, visual learning. So that kind of modality is what is really important for someone with ADHD, aside from, of course, the traditional linguistic learning that we expect from the school.
Thank you, Dr. Lim.
Well, for son, this online format has been very challenging for him because he's a very tactile learner. He likes to touch things. He likes his hands to be guided. So this is very two-dimensional, just the screen, and there are so many little boxes for the faces of the classmates as opposed to having actual people around you. So every single day, the word that he keeps repeating is boredom, boredom,
Yeah.
boredom, boredom. So for the second year, we made some adjustments with the school, and the shadow teacher who is helping him, guiding him, is very effective, and the second year is much better compared to the first year of online learning.
Yeah. It sounds like from both what you with Dr. Lim is saying and you guys are saying is that it takes a lot of very intensive um attention, I guess. And you mentioned that you guys have twins. So it makes me curious. Is there this sort of like, words not imbalance? What's the a
Disparity.
sort of like disparity with how, thank you, Dr. Lim, with how much attention you're able to give your son who is living with ADHD versus your other son who doesn't? And what's
Well,
that like?
what we always tell both the boys is that we are working as a team. So our effort and our actions, our thoughts are as a team, as one. So it's not just this boy and that boy
Yeah.
and then as parents. So we help each other out. We support each other in whatever way that they need individually. So I can be spending more time with your brother because that's the kind of attention and help that he needs. So
Yeah.
they've always had that kind of mindset. So I guess they already know.
Thank you. But and also again, I mean, I don't mean to focus just on your sons. I also was thinking about the fact that that means that, or what does self-care look like for you guys? Because
Oh,
as
yeah.
I can imagine, for you, it can be very taxing at times. So what do you guys do to take care of yourselves then?
Well, before I would feel sorry for him that he has to have this extra burden as a learner. So whenever he would get upset, I would allow him to lash out on me, and then I realized it's not healthy and it's not sustainable. So I also taught him to appreciate me as his guide and as his mom. So if he gets upset, I would help him distinguish um, his feelings. Like, okay, I know you're upset, I know you're frustrated, but I'm not your enemy. So don't get mad at me or don't shout at me because I'm here to guide you. I'm the one helping you.
Yeah.
But before, I would just let him, throw tantrums and yell at me and all that because I didn't know how to guide him to express his feelings and to channel his emotions. But with through the years with the counselors that we've been working with, they gave us the tools to help my son um, express his feelings, express his frustrations in a safe way, and also for me how I can cope and how I can support my children in a healthy manner.
Thank you. And that's also what I realize about the work that we do as therapists or as people who are supporting people with ADHD is that it's a lot of skills development. Like the work is it's about psychoeducation. It's about helping them expand their emotional vocabulary, learning how to express themselves in different ways. Um, there was something that I think, Dr. Lim, you pointed out that you said that you had students who were able to graduate from the Ateneo. And so that gets me to there was, before I even did my clinical training, there was this misconception that ADHD is something that you outgrow. Now I've known that's not true, but where does that come from? Where does that misconception come from?
Well, it's because you see, it starts with the frontal lobe of an ADHD person does develop. It does develop. It just takes longer to develop. The frontal lobe is the area for executive function. That's where you have this the control of the emotions,
Yeah.
which is in the amygdala, but the control is in the frontal lobe. Response inhibition, emotional regulation, task initiation and maintenance, and monitoring. All of these things do develop in an individual with ADHD. And so as they get older and they're taught appropriately, they're able to use the strategies because they are intelligent enough to remember these strategies. And then they're able to do for themselves what is being done before when they were being managed. Now, generally speaking, especially among the hyperactive population, they may lose the hyperactivity sometime during the teen years.
Yeah.
And that's why people think they have outgrown it or they're matured. But actually, it's because they've already learned how to manage themselves. And the hyperactivity is no longer a physical hyperactivity, more of a mental hyperactivity. They're very creative. They get distracted. They daydream and all of that. So that's where that's probably coming from. It's because they're capable of learning the strategies of managing themselves. That's why they may not have those signs. And I dare say a lot of people were undiagnosed, especially in the older generation, because they were managed properly through good old discipline and parental controls that were very nurturing, I might say, encouraging. So that's why people think that you outgrow it.
Yeah. But that's what I'd like to make note of now for all of our listeners is that the presentation of ADHD throughout a person's lifetime is not just about the presentation of all things of inattention, of impulsivity, and hyperactivity, like all throughout their entire life. There's sort of like an inverse kind of relationship where, from a preschool and a school age, what's more prominent really is the hyperactivity and impulsivity. And that diminishes as you go into adolescence and your college age and your adulthood, whereas ang mas naiiral naman is the inattention. Because like you said, the hyperactivity is less behavioral and more mental or cognitive.
Yeah.
So we have a question from the audience. Can a person develop ADHD at a later age? Like, does it manifest at a later age?
You don't develop it at a later age. You just probably are more noticeable at a later age when there are less parental controls, when your expectations of behavior have reached a certain point of, executive function where you're expected to be able to manage yourself. So it doesn't really, it's just that they didn't mature. It's like your 2-year-old activity in a 6-year-old, or your 8-year-old activity in a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
It's just that they weren't apparent when they were younger because the expectations were not as rigid or as high. And so it's not something that you develop later on. It probably is just noticed or diagnosed. And it's possible to diagnose them as an adult when there's absolutely no structure, you're left to your own devices. So that can happen. That can really happen.
Yeah. So there's no such thing, or maybe it's a misuse of the term, like adult onset ADHD. It's maybe it's just that it's noticed.
Yes.
In the adulthood. I have a question now. So Dr. Lim, you are a founding member of the ADHD Society of the Philippines, and Marge and Jay, I'm curious also about how you've come to discover the ADHD Society of the Philippines. But tell us a little bit more. So what's the main mission or goal, or why did the ADHD Society of the Philippines come about?
Well, it was founded by people that had concerns. One of them being an ADHD individual himself, who actually moved from 5 different schools before he finally graduated from the UP. One of them was Ateneo, okay, and then some therapists who were dealing with individuals that were into substance abuse, okay, and then 2 of us were developmental pediatricians, and we knew that we couldn't do it all. That the support of individuals, therapists like yourselves, other parents that have gone through that journey and have been able to learn strategies, teachers, we needed everybody to be, to have their say about how to manage ADHD. And we felt that if we had a society where these people would come together, discuss, be able to support each other, then we will be able to be more effective in managing these children. Because, well, medication does help, but it's not the be all and end all of this. I mean, I'm a medical doctor, but that's not the be all and end all. It really just helps in certain areas, but it really needs to be supplemented a lot by a lot of intervention. So we
That's right.
felt that the ADHD Society was one particular group that would be able to do that. And soon enough, we were able to put up seminars, awareness seminars first, then parent seminars and teachers training seminars. And that's where we really we wanted advocacy to really go up to the level of national consciousness and understanding, and not just tolerance, but support of what needs to be done to be able to make these
Yeah.
individuals successful. So that's
Yeah.
why we wanted the ADHD Society start.
Thank you. Margin J, how did you come about, or how did you learn about the ADHD Society of the Philippines?
I think it was 3 years ago when the society staged a conference, and I attended that, and I met other parents who were experiencing the same challenges that we were going through, and so I found it very helpful to have that kind of support.
Okay. So sorry, go Jay.
Yes, Pat, I just like to thank Doctora and the founders of ADHD. It's been very helpful. I mean, for a time, I went through depression because of
Yes.
this situation, but because I know that there are people there who are experiencing the same thing, and there's support, it makes you, go on and try strategies. At least, there are a lot of ways and different strategies to deal with this. And if you have each other's backs, and you people that who experience it, who has older children with ADHD, and then you realize they can be successful, it makes you see a light at the end of the tunnel. And because of that experience and the support, and of course the strategies that they've already had gone through, many of the strategies and the therapies that they taught us, or at least we found out, helped in the interventions that we made with Gabby, which is very good. So Doc, thank you, and of course to all the founders of the ADHD Society for doing this. That's why Marge and I are now advocating and telling our story. That it's not. There are ways to make the kids better, and of course better people.
I'd like to say something else. You asked Pat about self-care. I think that is so critical because, we always allude to this analogy of being in an airplane and the oxygen mask dropping, and you need to put it on yourself first before you put it on your child. That's what we also started at the parent support group, because we felt, self-care, mental health care, going through depression, having someone to hold your hand and lead you and say, hey, this fight is not over. There's a lot that we can do about it. It is so critical that you have that kind of support. Really.
I remember
so that's why.
Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, so that's why. Yeah, go ahead. That's why I said the parent support group I failed to mention was one of the first things we also started. Right.
And it was very effective. In fact, the first time I went to the ADHD meeting, I wasn't feeling very well. You know what I mean? First of all, I'm having what do you call that? At first, it's acceptance. You have to accept it, and it's hard. It's pretty hard for us to accept things, especially Marge and I are overachievers with a lot of plans, and we were like thinking maybe Gabby would be a pilot or whatever, a doctor, or you have
Pwede pa rin.
Pwede pa rin naman, Doc.
Pwede pa
Absolutely.
rin. Pwede, absolutely.
Pwede naman. But we realized that at first kasi it's hard. Sometimes hindi mo nga alam ano ba to. Kasi nung una we didn't have any idea what ADHD is.
We didn't know anybody.
Then we started reading about it.
We didn't know anyone in our family or amongst our friends.
Yeah.
We had absolutely no idea what to expect.
And when Marge asked me, why don't you try the meeting? One time we went to I went to a meeting there, and then I realized, it can be better. They can be better, and they can do do well. So we tried the interventions and it worked. And there was this one doctor also who helped us. His name is Dr. Raymond Escalona. He's into functional medicine.
Functional medicine.
It's for him. It there's nutritional is you can treat ADHD using food as medicine support.
Yeah.
And I think it worked. For well, I don't know. I saw the change in behavior in Gabby, so it helped also. Plus the other interventions that we did. We have a lot of interventions, doc. And if I may, to parents who just recently found out that their kids have ADHD, do not despair. Seek help, and maybe you can join the society wherein get to know other people who have the same situation, and somehow it gives you hope that your kid will turn out okay.
Yeah. One of the things I think people fail to realize that is when it's often it's not just one person who is impacted by a diagnosis. It has the potential to impact the entire system, and it can be very isolating. Again, not just for the person who is diagnosed, but also for the entire system, especially if it's a system of care. And so I'm really glad that we have the ADHD Society of the Philippines to advocate for more awareness, really, and more a deeper understanding of this diagnosis. There are certain things that people actually don't even realize about ADHD. The fact that, for example, more than a little bit more than half of adults with ADHD have comorbidities. Other mental health diagnoses apart from ADHD itself, things like mood disorders, like depression, anxiety disorders. You mentioned, Dr. Lim, kanina, that substance use disorders are also prevalent, and also impulse control disorders. And so we really need more understanding of this. I don't want to call it an illness. It's a condition.
It's a condition.
Yeah. And so it's very timely that you guys that the ADHD Society of the Philippines is commemorating its 18th ADHD Awareness Week this week. So could you tell us more about this? Number one, why this week in particular? Is there any specific anything special about this week that it falls here, or wala naman?
Actually, it started with choosing not to compete with other conditions, the other disabilities. No, that's the reality, because January is Autism Awareness Week, and then July is multiply handicapped, or I can't remember the exact term, but it has to do with multiply handicapped in rehabilitation week and all that. And we felt October was a good time. And also because it's always in the middle of the semester, usually, when you start to have these conditions, unmask themselves, get discovered, they go to the doctors, or they start to have issues. And it's timely that they are aware that there is such a thing as the ADHD Awareness Week at that particular time. So yeah, that was basically how we started choosing which particular month, and propitiously, that's where we got our mandate.
Sure. So what activities do you guys have ongoing for this week? And is it are they events that the public is allowed to attend, or
Well, we have a Facebook page where you can actually find out a lot about these particular activities, right? But we do have, yesterday, October 20, it was a Talk to My Child speech strategies, because there are some of them that have speech delays. So we had a speech pathologist talk about how to talk to ADHD individuals. Then on the 22nd, that's tomorrow, we have caring for persons with ADHD and their families. This is a team that's going to be talking about this in the time of pandemic. This is at 7:30. They're always in the evenings, basically, so that adults and parents and individuals after work, And then there's October 23, we have Braving Adult ADHD. This is by an adult psychiatrist, Dr. Carlo Banaag, who's going to be talking about it. This is at 10 a.m. in the morning, though. And then there's Effective Strategies for Teachers on October 30. And then there's going to be a big webinar also on October 30th with Dr. Cornelio Bana Jr., the father of child psychiatry,
Father. Yeah.
and Dr. Stella Manalo, my colleague, who's a developmental pediatrician, will be talking about ADHD extensively. So those are the activities. And then there's an occupational therapist, there's yoga classes, there's learning, there's all of these things. And then there are going to be free assessments actually from occupational therapists from 2 therapy centers, the Word Abilities and Talk Active. So it's really nice if you can really, hook up and find out about this. And then we have our regular support group meetings also. We have support group meetings for the parents every
Yeah.
first Saturday. There's one in the morning for the members, and then for non-members that are just curious to find out about it, you can attend the afternoon. These are all on Zoom. And then we have a teen support group meeting also. That's on a quarterly basis, I believe, because teens have their own issues with just being an adolescent in itself, and then having ADHD. And then we have adult support group, and this is a really interesting thing because they're very active and they're very lively in their discussions. I've never been to one, but I've heard about it, and they really just enjoy being able to discover all the quote unquote mishaps, misadventures, and all the ways that they're able to cope with it. And it's a fun thing, and they're able to say, okay, we can laugh about it because we've managed to overcome the hurdle, or we've managed to help ourselves get some help or something. So it's really good. Now, this is every second Saturday of the month, by the way, the adult
Yeah.
support group meeting. So we have these activities for the ADHD Society of the Philippines.
Sounds like a very jam-packed week, but I'm excited to share some of the resources and some of the events with some of my parent friends. I'll be very honest. Somebody just messaged me today asking, how do I know, or what do I do if I suspect that my child has ADHD? And I hope what I said to him was right. And this was before our episode. And so what I said to him was, well, honestly, usually those things are assessed not by the parents themselves, although you can pinpoint some things that if you notice any irregularities, but you often have to bring them to a pediatrician or a developmental psychiatrist. So
Yeah.
but then now I have another resource to kind of refer them to. So, but then Dr. Lim, maybe this could be one of our final things before we go to before we end up the show is, what advice can you give to parents and caregivers and teachers when they suspect that their children might have ADHD?
Oh, that's quite a difficult thing to. But the first thing I would probably suggest is that they study and educate themselves about ADHD and know how to, how the person works, the quirks. Because, like I said in the beginning of the program, each individual with ADHD is unique, and they will have a different way of reacting certain things. Some of them dislike being interrupted. Some of them always want to interrupt or always want immediate feedback. Some of them
Yeah.
are very hyperactive, and some of them are just sluggish or don't want to move around. So you get to know the child well and just see where are the areas of dysfunction. Try to be as kind in corrective feedback. That's another thing, and don't make them feel that there's something wrong with them. I always try to tell the parents, don't make them feel like there's something wrong with them. Just tell them they need help. It's just like wearing glasses. You can see better if you're wearing glasses because you can't see so well so that kind of thing. So like you said, you don't want to call it a disorder. It's very hard for us to label it that way, but it is a disorder, but based on DSM officially. But I want them to say that this is something you can overcome and you can do something about it. And I want it to be a very positive thing rather than something that's, like a death sentence or the end of the world. Of
Yeah.
course, there's always that difficulty accepting that, but definitely there's like Jay was saying, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So I would want the parents to say, hey, let's get help. Let's get to know this and let's get help for this particular condition.
Margin J, your thoughts. So, as Dr. Lim mentioned, you did say earlier that there's light at the end of the tunnel. But I guess my question, naman, is, as parents who have been for the past 3 or 4 years, you've lived with a child with ADHD. What lessons have you learned about parenting, about caring for children, about caring for yourselves that you can share with the people listening in today and who will be listening when we kind of publish this episode in other platforms?
Well, at first, I thought that ADHD is just going to be about having problems in school. So we focused on getting interventions related to schoolwork, but it permeates different aspects of life. And I wish that we could have shifted our focus in the beginning instead of just, focusing on his limitations. It's also nice to develop his strengths because he has to be confident about many things. Having struggles in school is one thing, but he has to be proud uh, of other things because he has different talents also. And
Yes.
recently, we've been doing that. We've been focusing on making him um, excel in other areas so that he will have better self-esteem, better self-worth. So I guess try to balance, not just look at what he's weak at, but also feed his
Yeah.
strengths.
Thank
For
you.
me, I learned so many things of actually with for having a child with ADHD. You become more patient, you become more loving, and you become more I don't know that happened to me. More responsible, of course, with your family. And one thing that that taught me, especially now that it's a pandemic, you really appreciate what you have. The simple things in life. You don't
Yes.
Material things don't matter anymore. I mean, especially with this pandemic, you realize it's the relationships. It's the relationships that you have with your family, your loved ones. That's what's most important in life. And maybe it's about happiness and maybe serving people and being yourself. Because before I was always concerned about my career, our businesses, and then we realized, hey, it's not about that. Even if you have, you're financially secured already. Because Marge and I were quite financially secured at a very young age, and then because we worked so hard, we worked so hard for it, and then all of a sudden this hit us. And then you realize, these things do not matter much. I'd give anything just to see my children happy. So um, we kept on working so hard and had these so many ambitions, and then you realize that what makes you happy is the most important thing in life. And for us parents, seeing our child growing, developing, being responsible children makes us, it's that simple already. Dati ang lalaki ng pangarap ko. I wanted to be an anchor of TV Patrol. I wanted to be the next kabayan, or maybe then you realize, teka lang, hindi naman pala yan eh. It's not about that. It's not about the rat race. It's um it's just a good family relationship. That's our priority now, and then that's what we're doing. For people listening out there, just find your happiness, and you'll be happier and living a wonderful life.
Yeah.
Because life is so short. All of a sudden, you realize it's short, and then, especially with this pandemic, you have friends and people who passed away, and you your priorities suddenly change in life.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think my key takeaway from this really is that ADHD isn't, again, and this is the way I look at all mental conditions. Really, it's not a sickness. Yeah, it might make it difficult to do certain things that other people might not find difficult, but you know ADHD people with ADHD are highly capable, can be highly functional. It just takes the right amount of love and support, and of course appropriate intervention too. So for everybody's appreciation, if you want to learn more about the ADHD Society of the Philippines, they have a Facebook page. I believe it's facebook.com/ADHD SOC fills. So ADHD, or you can just search on the Facebook search bar, ADHD Society of the Philippines.
Yes.
Yeah. So they have ongoing events. So if you guys are interested to know more about the society itself, or the events that they have for ADHD Awareness Week and ADHD Awareness Month, you just head on over to their Facebook page. To close us out, there's a song apparently, as Justin has made me aware of. Could you tell us a little bit more about the song, Dr. Lim?
Well, actually, it's a story of a kid, a common experience, and how he wants to be seen and understood. So I hear it's a tearjerker. I haven't heard the entire song, but
Ooh, okay.
yeah. So I don't want to hear it because of that.
Okay.
No.
Sure.
But really, it is a good song. My colleagues have told me that it's really very endearing to hear it also, because you get to see what a child's perspective on ADHD is.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so to close us out, just let's play on Kwento ni Bolilit. Thanks, March and Jay, for being with us today. Thank you, Dr. Lim, for being with us
Thank
today.
you.
This has been
Thank you very
MindEd, your
much.
weekly slice of mental health tips and tidbits. My name is Pat. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Pat.
Thank you, March. Thank you, Jay.
Ako'y batang makulit, paulit-ulit, paikot-ikot, napakalikot. Sabi nila ako'y titik-iti, di mapakali sa isang tabi. Mapilit na ingay, pasigaw-sigaw, pabigla-bigla, napakagaslaw. Maramdamin pasaway, masumpong iyak, lagi ako'y tinatawag na batang sutin. Ako'y batang may ADHD, batang may ADHD. Hindi nila alam kahit ako'y ganito. Mabait, matalino, masunurin ako. Di ko sinasadya na ako'y ganito.
Let us understand mental health and explore how we can take care of our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Welcome to your weekly slice of mental health tips and tidbits with Pat and B, here on MindEd.
Sa'yo sumisilong kapag ang puso ko'y pagod.
Radyo-Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo-Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo-Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle. Radyo-Katipunan.